Hey everyone, this is a demo video to take you through the new updates to the billing system. This is likely the largest update that we've made to PrepBusiness since it was first created. So I'm really excited to take you through it. A lot of the updates are internal rather than external, but there are still some very significant external changes that, especially if you use manual billing, will change your workflow. So please do watch through this video to see how these updates will affect the way that you're doing things at your prep center. We had three major goals for this update. The first was stability, making sure that everything worked properly all the time. Predictability, so that you knew what was happening, such as when clients would receive invoices, when clients would be charged to their credit card or not, so that you could understand what's happening in the billing system, so there are no surprises for you or your clients. And the third was flexibility, to support all of the various billing arrangements and configurations that the prep centers that we're working with are using, so that you can charge your clients in the way that you would like to charge them. So those were our goals, and I hope that that's the way that you experience the new billing system. So let me dive in and show you the updates. So let's go to the new billing page here first. You'll notice some design updates. You'll see here that the charge index, or the list of charges, and the details of the charge have received some design updates. As well, this new charge has been updated to reflect some new names here. The functionality is essentially the same as before, but we are now calling it, instead of a custom charge, we call it a quick adjustment, and this is adding a client service charge. So those are some updates on that side. So let's go through two things in terms of workflow changes. The first is if you are on automatic billing. So if your client is using a billing cycle rather than a manual method, then as this description says here, the clients will automatically receive an invoice every month. And if they have added a credit card to the portal, that amount of the invoice will be charged to their card, or attempted to charge to their card. If you are on manual, then you will not automatically invoice clients at any time, and you'll have to do all of that from the billing page. So the billing workflow for automatic billing cycle clients is not significantly different. But for manual billing, it is quite different. So let's look at that. So we have now we have different statuses here on the charges. So instead of having pending invoice add, invoice sent, invoiced, charged, there's two main statuses that you'll see here. One is open, which means it hasn't been added to an invoice yet, and the other is invoiced, which is obviously after it's been added to an invoice. So you can add things to invoices in two ways. One is just draft an invoice from draft an invoice of all of the current charges. And then the second is to invoice charges that you select using these check marks here. So let's first invoice a single charge and see how that works. So you're going to click this button. It'll open a confirmation dialog box. You'll notice here that unlike the previous method, now this invoice is going to be created as a draft, so it will not be automatically emailed to the client. It won't be charged to the client until you do a new step in the workflow called finalization. So let's look at what a draft invoice looks like. So here is your list of invoices. This is the draft invoice that we just created. And you can now either delete this invoice with no issues at all. So if you see here, this charge is invoiced. And if I delete this invoice and go back to the billing, this charge just reverts back to an open state. So while you're drafting invoices, you can select whichever charges you like, create a draft invoice, go delete that invoice, select a different set of charges without any issues. So let's get back to the state where we have a draft invoice here. So now we have this draft invoice, and if you would like to finalize and lock this invoice, what that means is those charges that were added to this invoice will then no longer be editable. So you can see here the invoice and the charges contained in it will no longer be editable. And then another thing that we'll look at in a minute is the invoice ready for payment notification. So you can configure whether or not a client receives a notification at this stage or not. Let's confirm this. This will now create an invoice. It will now finalize the invoice, and it will make it available for payment. So this invoice is now visible on your client's portal. So before this stage, this invoice was not visible to the client. It's only available in your portal, not on the client's portal. So now that it's finalized, it's available in the client's portal. And if we go in here, you can also see now it links to the Stripe invoice ID, so it's linked on Stripe. And when you download the invoice, instead of generating the invoice on our side, we now take the invoice that Stripe generates, and we essentially link that here so that your client is receiving consistent invoices instead of receiving occasionally invoices from Stripe which look one way and invoices from our portal which look a different way. So now there's a consistent interface there. If the client has a billing method added to their account, there would be a button here called Attempt Credit Card for Payment. And that would essentially charge the client's credit card if they have one available. Otherwise, you can mark it as paid if they've paid outside of the credit card system by check or ETF, transfer, wire transfer, something along those lines. Or you can void this invoice. So voiding this invoice means that the client no longer has to pay it, but it doesn't change the fact that the previous charges were locked. So it's not a deleting, it's a voiding. And so everything remains locked on those charges and the invoice. Okay, those are the main updates to invoicing. Now let's have a look at how charges have updated. There are no significant updates other than amendment charges. So previously, when you had already invoiced a charge or a shipment and you wanted to update that shipment, there would be issues if that invoice was already locked or paid or something like that. So now we have a new concept called amendment charges. So let's have a look at what happens when we go into the shipment. This shipment has already been added to an invoice, or the charge for the shipment has already been added to an invoice. Let's update a service and see what happens. Go back to the billing tab. So you can see here we have added a new charge for the difference between the old charge and what was added to the shipment. So we added another $2 service to that shipment. And now you can see we have this amendment charge. It's amending the previous charge from this outbound shipment, and it's saying there's an additional $2 that was added in charges to that shipment. So now you can edit shipments freely, and you'll be able to see those reflected as amendment charges so that everything is clear about what's happening for each invoice. Each invoice is set and locked, but you can still make edits to previously charged shipments. Okay, so the last thing that we will have a quick look at is the invoice notification. So in your notification section, there is a new client notifications value called invoice ready for payment. And you can enable or disable this particular notification. This notification will be sent to a client anytime that you finalize an invoice on the portal. So if you would like the client to receive that, just keep this enabled. Otherwise, you can go in here and disable that. So that is it in terms of the side of the billing system that you will see. We're excited to have you try it out, and please let us know if there are any issues or difficulties that you encounter, and we will get those sorted for you as soon as we can. Thanks a lot.